Welcome. Thank you for joining us asynchronously whenever you choose to watch this. You don't know this, but this is take something like 72 on our end because in take one, I said, I apologize if there are technical difficulties, and there have been technical difficulties. So thank you for joining us. This is the online version of Wednesday Night Sessions, which is the literary reading series for KickstART Farmington, the local arts organization in Farmington, Michigan, in Metro Detroit. Thank you a bunch for joining us here on YouTube or wherever we end up uploading this. We are glad to have you here. This used to be an in-person get-together in the KickstART Farmington Art Gallery and Shop, which is a beautiful place. And if you get a chance to swing by, anyways, they are open with limited hours during the pandemic. So I encourage you to stop by. You can imagine that we are surrounded by gorgeous art by Metro Detroit artists right now. Well, actually, I guess you technically are. That's my 10-year-old's painting right there. So there you go. Oh, where is that? That might be my 6-year-old's painting. I don't remember who does what. I'm a terrible parent. Thank you to Aaron Burch for joining us tonight. He was once upon a time one of two of the next guests for the in-person version of Wednesday Night Sessions, and then the pandemic struck and we locked down, and we are finally back to the events, but we're online now, and thank you to Dwayne Hayes for helping with that from the KickstART Farmington end of things. And thank you to Aaron for his patience and for joining us tonight as the guinea pig for the first version of the online Wednesday Night Session. At this point, I, Mitch Nobis, your host for this event, am going to step aside and toss the microphone over to Aaron Burch. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Mitch. So, as Mitch said, my name is Aaron Burch. I'm the author of a couple of books, a short story collection called Backswing, and a book of literary criticism / appreciation / memoir called Stephen King's The Body, which is all about Stephen King's novella, The Body, which was turned into Stand By Me. And it's kind of part about the book, part about the movie, part just about me. Yeah, I think that's my bio. I'm going to read a couple of short pieces, one very short piece, and then I'm going to try to read the beginning of an essay that's in progress. In part because I think it reads well, hopefully, and in part because it's in progress. And if I read it, maybe that will work as self-inspiration to make myself finish it. So I'm going to read first this piece that was just on this website, X-Ray magazine, last week, called American Lake. Did you grow up near water? What did you think of when I asked that? A lake, a river, an ocean, a pool? Do you like to swim? Do you remember learning how? Did your grandmother live not on a lake, but near one? Within walking distance? Do you have fond memories of going to your grandmother's house, getting one of the large towels she kept for you in her bathroom, one of the inner tubes she kept in her garage? Do you remember being little and using actual inner tubes on the water, not an inflatable pool float or tube like you might buy from Target or Fred Meyer or Walmart or Meijer or wherever, but an actual rubber donut made and perhaps even previously used as the inner part of a car or truck tire? Did you ever get in trouble for using her automatic garage door like a toy, hitting the button so it would retract up, and then grabbing the metal lip at the bottom and letting it carry you up into the air when you were still young and little enough for that to work? Have you ever looked at your own garage door and wondered how one could have ever had power to lift you floating up into the air while also at least a little bit wanting to try again? Do you remember that short walk from your grandmother's house to the public access trail to the lake? Remember the one house along the way that had rabbits and chickens and goats? Remember how the trail was pretty well hidden, snaking its way between two houses, two private properties, but it was supposed to be for everyone? Remember your parents telling you that every lake has to be accessible to the public? Do you think that's true? Did you still take it for granted that most everything your parents told you must be true, and so you didn't question it, either the legality of such a claim, nor the fact that the lake already had a park with a beach and a roped-off swim area and lifeguards and boat access just a mile or two down the road? And so wouldn't that already count as the lake being accessible to the public? Do you remember the dock at this small beach? Not the big one at the park, but the one that felt both public and private, almost like your own little personal beach on the lake. Do you remember swimming under it? How you could swim under, but then come up and wade there, your head above water, but under the dock, this little hidden foot or two that seemed like another world? Did you ever do that? Did you also, later in life, have a phase where you loved getting and hanging out on roofs? What do you think it is about certain stages of your life and being under or on top of things? Pillow forts, caves, sitting on car hoods, the roof of your house, your local church, your school, whatever building had some combination of nearby fence or tree or other accessory that made it possible to get on top of. Have you ever been skinny dipping? Do you remember the first time? Was the idea yours or theirs? When you think of night swimming, how much do you remember? Was it clear skies? Was the moon out? Have you revisited that lake as an adult? Parked at the end of the cul-de-sac next to a public property, no access sign, right where the trailhead used to be? Did you sit in your car listening to a playlist of songs from your youth and ask yourself questions about whether you should abide by the sign or not? What did you do next? Thanks. That's American Lake. So this is, as I said, an essay in progress. I need to finish it. It's called Landmarks. The Applebee's in Orem, Utah looks almost exactly like every other Applebee's, which is to also say it looks a lot like every bar and grill style chain restaurant in America. Every TGI Fridays, every Red Robin, every Ruby Tuesdays, every Chili's. You walk in and there's an onslaught of color and various themed memorabilia. There's casual chain dining flair. There's excessive decoration as restaurant identity. I went straight to the bar, sat down, grabbed a menu, looked around, and realized it didn't actually look exactly like every other Applebee's I'd ever been in. There were a handful of groups of people sitting together throughout the restaurant, but there wasn't anyone else sitting at any of the seats at the bar. It was barely even a bar, I suddenly realized. There weren't any taps for beers on draft. There weren't any beer or whiskey branded rubber bar runners. There wasn't a collection of whiskey and vodka and tequila and rum and lime juice and orange juice and margarita mix and sour mix for strawberry lime margaritas or Pair of Jacks or Captain Bahama Mamas. There wasn't even a bartender. I was in Utah, and I'd been in Denver the night before and Nebraska before that because I was driving across the country from Michigan, where I live now, to where I grew up in Tacoma, Washington. I'd gone a little out of my way here and there to see the kinds of landmarks that make a road trip a road trip. I went to Chimney Rock and Carhenge, a recreation of Stonehenge made entirely out of old cars, all standing on end and painted gray, and Red Rocks Park and Buffalo Bill Cody's grave in Colorado. The next day, I'd drive down a long 10-mile dirt road to see the spiral jetty on the Great Salt Lake, and the day after that, I'd visit another Stonehenge recreation, this one overlooking the Columbia River that divides Washington and Oregon. And on my way back, at the end of summer, I'd stop at Waldrug and I'd camp in the Badlands and I'd go to the Field of Dreams baseball field in Iowa. But this Applebee's is the place I'll think of first and most vividly when thinking about the landmarks of that summer road trip. Almost 3 years ago, I was driving home from work one day and my phone rang. Even though I was driving, and even though, like almost everyone, I never answer my phone anymore, not even when it's someone I know, but especially not when it's an unknown number, when the screen lights up with a number instead of a name, I answered it. I'm not sure why. Hello? A woman's voice on the other end answered. Is this Aaron Burch? Yeah. I looked up and the light had turned green. I started driving while holding the phone to my ear. She told me my birth date, the city I was born in, asked if that was true. I said, yeah, again. Do you know why I'm calling? And the thing was, given those questions, that was how she started the conversation, I was pretty sure I did. Almost 2 years before that, I'd gotten a Facebook message from someone. I am seeking an Aaron M. Burch born on your date of birth in California who was adopted. If you are he and would like family information, I can put you in touch with them. The message was from someone I wasn't Facebook friends with, so it had gone to that side folder where Facebook tells you, unlike messages from friends, they won't know you've seen it until you reply. I didn't reply. I ignored the message and pretended like I'd never seen it in the first place, and more or less went on with my life. Until I was driving home from work one day, and I got a phone call out of nowhere as a reminder. Is it about me being adopted? I asked. As often as not, I forget I'm adopted. I don't really think of it as part of my identity, or maybe I think of it so much a part of my identity as to take it for granted. I don't remember the moment my parents told me because I don't think there really was a moment to remember. They'd always told me, since even before I could remember their telling. And they'd always framed it, my adoption, but also me, as a gift. And they also always told me that once I turned 18, it was up to me if I wanted to seek out and try and find my birth parents. They'd support whatever I wanted. I knew my bio parents were young when I was born, and they were Mormon, and that's about all I knew. In the 70s and 80s, LDS Family Services was the second largest member of the National Council for Adoption, and it was through these services that I was adopted. Through that church and belief and faith that I was a blessing. I'm not that curious of a person, and I had such a happy childhood, annoyingly happy almost, too happy to have become a writer, I sometimes joke, but also too happy to want for something else. I always kind of thought I might one day seek out and try and find my birth parents, or at least more information about them, while also not really having any specific desire to. If anything, I kind of like the mystery of not knowing. And then one day, out of nowhere, I got a Facebook message from someone saying they could put me in touch with family. And then a couple of years later, on my way home from work, I was on the phone with someone, Julie, she'd said her name was, who was telling me my biological mom was looking for me. Hold on, I told her. I'm driving. I gotta pull over into this parking lot. I pulled over into a parking lot, parked and turned off my car. She asked if I had any questions, and I wasn't sure if I did, but I asked what she could tell me, what she was allowed to. And for the next 5 or maybe 10 minutes or maybe half an hour, I'm not sure, it all felt like a blur. She told me all kinds of stuff. She said my bio parents ended up staying together. She told me they got married later the same year I was born. She told me they had 5 more kids. So you have 5 full-blood siblings, she said, which was just a rewording of saying they'd stayed together and had 5 more kids, but it felt like new information when she said it like that. She told me they'd stayed LDS and still live in California, which is where I was born and adopted and lived until I was 5 or 6. She gave me my bio mom's home address and her email and her Facebook page and her phone numbers, both home and cell. I wrote it all down on the back of a pay stub I found in my glove box. And then she said it was now up to me how to proceed. And then we hung up. And then I kind of freaked out. I didn't know what to do or what I wanted. And it was all pretty confusing and felt a little intrusive. My life was pretty good. I didn't have much interest in shaking it up or complicating it. I put that pay stub away in a drawer and mostly forgot about it. It became a good story to tell. So I'm adopted. I never went looking. You won't believe this phone call I got one day. They stayed together, 5 full-blood siblings. A year passed and I didn't think about it too much, but every now and then my wife would check in, ask if I'd made any decision about what to do, if I was going to reach out. And then one day we were on a walk and she asked again, and for whatever reason, because I was tired of her asking, or maybe enough time had passed and it no longer felt intrusive or confusing, and I was finally actually getting a little curious, or maybe I sensed that we were beginning to get a little stagnant in our marriage, and I could tell, despite it being my nature to do the opposite, that I needed to do something to shake things up. And I wasn't sure how to do that for us, but this would at least be something. So I answered that I would, that day, as soon as we got home. And then when we got home, that's what I did. I opened up my email and wrote to my bio mom, "Hello. I appreciate you contacting me and your kind well wishes. Sorry it has taken me so long to respond. I was a little overwhelmed with thoughts and how to feel, but I'm happy to hear from you." She replied the next morning, briefly but excitedly, and then again a couple days later, confessing her own uncertainty and awkward feelings. We went back and forth a few times, and I told her the story of the adoption finder calling me, my surprise at all of it, at having been reached, at having full-blood siblings, maybe especially, something that had never crossed my mind. "Actually," she wrote back, "life moved quickly for me after your birth." And then she clarified that in fact, her children were my half-siblings, and I wondered how the person who I had talked to had gotten such wrong information to pass on. We kept sharing emails, though sporadically, a few with big summarizing life updates, but mostly quick notes with Thanksgiving and Christmas and birthday well wishes. Like the call I received one day on my drive home from work, it mostly became a good story to tell that I otherwise didn't think about too often. And then last summer, I was in the middle of a cross-country road trip, and I was hanging out with a friend in Denver, and I pulled out my phone and mapped my route from there to get back to Tacoma, and I saw that it drove straight through Salt Lake City, and I remembered that my youngest half-sister, my bio mom's youngest daughter, lived in Salt Lake City, and I thought maybe I'd reach out and meet her. And that's more or less where this draft ends. And then I need to write about meeting her, and then after meeting her, going to an Applebee's and having a beer and watching the NBA Finals.
So, I mean, you know the second you choose to read a piece that's unfinished, that the immediate first audience response is going to be you have got to finish that, and yeah, you achieved that. I mean, I really need to hear the end of that. I don't even know where to start. Yeah, so I'm an adoptive parent myself, so I need to hear the rest of that from that angle. The fact that you stopped and watched the NBA finals, I need to hear that part too. Like there's so much of that I need to hear. So rest assured.
When Toronto won.
Oh, it was just last year? Oh wow. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to finish that. So this will be posted out there for the public to watch. So prepare, sir, to be hounded until you finish that. Yeah, so we'll be like hound dogs on your tail. So we're still, as I mentioned at the kickoff, Aaron and I have done this a couple of times already, trying to capture this on video for you all. So I'm still going to ask the questions. He knows what's coming this time, or does he? Maybe I have a curveball up my sleeve. I don't know. We'll see. But I want to track back to the first piece you read, because the American Lake was just released like a week ago, I think, as he and I are recording this. So probably 2 weeks-ish ago by the time you all can watch this. And I saw a lot of response on Twitter. It was very well received, and a lot of folks are like, I really love the format. It's just one question after another. What a creative, interesting format. So Aaron, could you tell us how you landed at that? Like, was it that way from the get-go, or did you kind of revise into the series of questions, or what?
Yeah, so it wasn't quite from the get-go, but it was really early on. So I've been writing a bunch of these short pieces, working on a novel that a little bit. I was going to start to say that I plug away at a little bit every day, but that is a huge lie. It's not very much not every day. But I've been working on this novel, and then it's kind of fun to just take a little break here and there, and try and tinker and come up with some kind of short, self-contained piece. And so I kind of accidented my way into this idea that this isn't always the case, and it's not an explicit rule for myself, but as often as not, these short pieces often have some kind of constrictive box that they fit into, which kind of helps me write it, and also helps in my mind, at least, for the writing, and I think often for the reading, but for my purposes it's much more important for the writing, is it helps make it feel like a real, like, short, self-contained piece, as opposed to something that maybe I could wonder, should this just be thrown into the novel? Should why is this separate? And so for this piece, it happened in questions. I think I was telling you earlier, I have another one that's just one long 1,000-word sentence that I just, in the first draft of it, was not one sentence, but every sentence was super run-on-y. And I just let myself lean into it and was like, let yourself add all the commas and all the ands. And I just liked the flow of it. And you can, like, edit it and tighten it when you come back to it. And then when I tightened it, when I came back to it, I was like, instead of separating it out into cleaner sentences, what if I lean further into the run-on and make it all one sentence? I have another piece where kind of it's real short, and every single sentence gets a footnote, and I think there's more. 2/3 of the words of the 1,000-word piece are in footnotes. And similarly, it happened where it kind of has this form where every sentence works in a certain way. And then I wanted to add this additional info, but it broke the form. So I threw it in a footnote, and then it became just sort of like, oh, maybe just what if everything gets footnoted? And then for this one, I just really like the sound and feel and prose of that initial question, that did you grow up near water? There was something that I liked about the dialogue of it. And I just liked the sound of it. I liked it as first sentence to a story, or in this case, an essay. And then I knew kind of once that I was writing about water, I write so much about nostalgia. And so I knew that I wanted to write about this lake that I went to, and wanted to write about my grandmother. But I couldn't quite figure out how to get out of the question. I didn't really want it dialogue, but I wasn't sure how to, like, cleanly get back into a more quote unquote normal point of view or tense. And so then, instead of getting out of it, I was like, well, what if I stay in it? And so then every sentence became a question. And that kind of alleviated that problem of having to get out of it, but then became its own new problem of, how do you write the story all in questions? And it became a kind of fun little challenge of how much narrative and specificity to me can I get away with squeezing into what on the surface seems like these direct address questions to the reader. And can I still get away with ultimately telling this kind of, like, personal essay about growing up that's hopefully, ideally, making the reader think about their own growing up. And even though I'm very much leaning into the specifics of my own story, there's something about the questions that's encouraging you to think about the lake you grew up on, or the shore, or a vacation you went on. I know one of your responses was similarly, it made you think of Michigan lakes. And I think maybe that was why it got so much response, which was great. And, when you try something, I definitely, the first person I sent to this, I was like, is this really dumb? Or is it, or is there something here? And then, you get a bunch of response that people liked it, and you're like, of course it's brilliant. I knew all along. I never thought maybe it was just a dumb throwaway.
I love that. That's like so much of the writer's journey right there. Right? Like, yeah, no, I totally meant that. Pee Wee Herman wiping on his bike. Like, no, it was totally on purpose. No, I think the piece is brilliant. And I mean, we're recording this for a Michigan-based show right now, right? And like, as I said on Twitter, like everybody from Michigan has, well, not everybody, obviously, but a lot of people from Michigan have that image of a lake and the public access to the lake. And I missed it when I read it on X-Ray. This didn't jump out to me, but when you were reading it, the line about being that 1 or 2 feet under the dock being another world, like I missed that when I was just reading text, but when you read it out loud, I'm like, oh yeah, yes, instantly was like right there, like you surface under the dock and there's like all the weird mossy things growing underneath, and like, yeah, like you've got a lot of Michigan readers who are gonna recognize that moment and every other moment in the piece too. So I think, yeah, thank you for walking us through how you landed the questions. I think it works perfectly for the piece, and it's such a cool, from the artistic writer side, such a cool story about how you kind of landed there. You know, that it's a shorter piece and a respite from the novel, so it has to be different from the novel somehow. I think it's just really cool behind the scenes on kind of how art works in the first place and the functions of creativity. All right, one other quick question.
Sure.
So, Hobart, one of my favorite things about Hobart, it's a fantastic literary journal, one of my favorites. And one of my favorite aspects is that you have an annual baseball issue. And as we record this, baseball is starting back up-ish. It may shut down by the time this video is out there. That's 2020 for you, but theoretically baseball is back. Hitting home runs at cardboard cutouts as we speak. And quick question, don't get to think much about it. When I say third baseman, who comes to mind?
Edgar Martinez, pre-DH.
So yeah, you wouldn't get to, as I said, this is a re-record. So I popped shortstop on him earlier and he was like, no hesitation, Omar Vizquel. He's got his guys ready to go. It's a baseball fan for you.
I'm very late. Yeah, late 80s, early 90s Seattle Mariners. So, and that's funny. I just like you zagged. So I was kind of expecting to say Omar again. And I don't really think of Edgar as third base. And then he think of him as DH, but you said third. I think maybe thinking about Omar too, I was just like in that mindset. And I was just like, Gar.
Perfect. I love it. And I want to bring back Pete earlier from our earlier conversation. This is so weird because I hate it when podcasts do this. Like we've all been part of this digital world where it's like, oh, we're re-recording. But earlier you talked about the nature of baseball being so nostalgic and how the first person in mind is not necessarily like the best statistics ever in that position or the current reigning all-star at that position, but just like whoever fits into your own life timeline.
Yeah.
And how we all identify with baseball so much, and why baseball so much more in that way than say football, soccer, basketball, etc. It's both a testament and a humongous question to baseball, I think. Like, why does that one work that way for us?
Yeah, and I think people have asked me a lot over the years because I've been doing this annual baseball issue for 15 probably now, and I don't watch that much baseball anymore. But I do it every and people sometimes ask why baseball. And even like as somebody who watches less of it, my answer is often just that like baseball is so much better at narrative than any other sport. And some of that is the slowness of the game, like lends itself to storytelling. I think you can tell stories during all those pauses. Something about that everybody's complaint about baseball is that it's too long or too slow. but there's something also about that length and slowness that feels sort of like a novel that you can live in. And that was always kind of my answer. And I think a secondary answer, which I think I'm kind of realizing just now, is just how tied to nostalgia baseball is, which is maybe also to its detriment, is that it's maybe too nostalgic and doesn't feel important now sometimes. And so one, that nostalgia lends itself toward narrative, and two is just the more and more I write, the more and more I realize that I'm writing about nostalgia. And so it makes that much more sense that I've been doing this literary baseball issue for so long, when that's also kind of one of my main themes that I read to again and again, as evidenced by American Lake. It's like I'm often about growing up, writing about childhood, writing about being young and what that meant. And for me, that's baseball, and that's Omar Vizquel, and that's Edgar and Ken Griffey Jr. and Dave Buhner and Randy Johnson. So.
Yeah, I mean, you had a good team to have nostalgia about too. That helps.
Yeah.
Right? I'm a Generation Xer from Michigan, so we had the '84 Tigers. Like it helps if you had a good team to grow up with.
For sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Aaron, thank you for great answers to the interview questions there at the end, but B, thank you for the phenomenal readings as well. And C, thank you for being the guinea pig for the first online version of Wednesday night sessions, and for your incredible patience as we ironed out a number of wrinkles here tonight. So I'll just wrap up by saying thank you for joining us. When we retweet and repost this and whatnot, we'll include Aaron's Twitter handles and website and stuff like that in there. So do please track down these pieces out on the internet and track down his book and everything else. So thank you again, Aaron, for joining us.
So much, Mitch.
Take care, everybody.